Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Tiffany Smith and today I have the honor of speaking with Mr. Michael Marsh. So Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself and what are you running for?
Well, I'm running for Congress in the 3rd District of Oregon, which is actually up in Multnomah County, basically. A little bit of Clackamas, but mostly Multnomah. And that's my partner in crime. Her name is Camo.
She's adorable.
And I've been an activist for a while. I became an activist, back in the 90s. And things were really bad. And I started out actually as a Democrat.
Okay.
And I did not belong in the Democrat Party.
Okay.
I was even a member of the Central Committee, and they would go like this when I came in the room.
Oh, wow.
Then I went to the Republican Party for a while. And I fit in a little better there. But then Gordon Smith was a senator, U.S. senator, and he declared that he didn't want pro-life Christians, pro-family Christians in his Republican Party, and
Okay.
pro-family, pro-life Christian. So
Okay.
yeah, we started a group of us started the Constitution Party.
Okay, so you've been in the Constitution Party from the beginning then?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so you've run for several different offices before.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult. It takes so much time and effort. What drives you to run again?
Probably the fact that, this country is in major difficulties. When I first started out, I came across Will Gaston and his wife Pamela. And when I first saw his video, I knew the country was in bad shape, but they really exposed the deep state. And as bad as I thought things were, I didn't want to believe that was true. So I met him and saw the documentation, and what he was exposing was the Child Protection Agency.
Okay.
How they were basically kidnapping children and sex trafficking the children. And so I helped him bring that to light. And they eventually murdered her, the state did. And, she had 1 million followers on YouTube. So
Okay.
the state, probably Kitzhaber ordered it, but she was murdered. And, hi. So then I really became an activist.
Okay.
And that is one of the things that I want to change, is get the federal government,
Yeah.
out of certain areas, and that's one of them.
Name another area that you really think is problematic, that something needs to be done to fix it.
Well, probably the most important area that needs to be changed is the education.
Okay.
Because the federal bureaucracy, especially when the Democrats are in charge, right now, Trump is shaking things up, and he put Betsy DeVos in there, and she believes in school choice. But if the Democrats ever get back in power, then go back to straight government schools.
Yeah.
And the Democrats are more interested in using the schools for social engineering rather than educating the children.
So you're really aiming for school choice then?
Very much. And the only way to really guarantee that is to get the federal government out of education.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that I would push for is an end to the Department of Education.
Okay, and what would you do? Would it be the charter schools like Trump is proposing?
Charter schools, home schools, online schools,
Okay.
all these are options, and of course the government schools. But the parents need to have a choice, and in order to continue having that choice, it has to be gotten out of the federal bureaucracy and turned over to the states, which constitutionally is where they should have been all along. But
Even Thomas Jefferson himself wanted public schooling, and he even decided it was not in the federal government's jurisdiction to do. So from the very, very beginning, our founding fathers believed that as well. So another area that's really big, that really affects everyone in the country, is taxation, and taxes continue to go up. Do you think that's better for the country, for taxes to go up and for us to fund all of these projects, or do you think it's better for taxes to really stay in the pockets of the individuals so they can spend it where they want to?
spend it where you want, keep it in the pockets. When the income tax was first passed in 1913, the word income meant the profit of the corporations. It had
Okay.
nothing to do with flesh and blood human beings. And somewhere along the line, probably under Roosevelt, it got changed. But that was the definition. And the reason they did it, interestingly, back in the 1890s, John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie and a few other billionaires, they started putting money into the colleges and the universities for the purpose of dumbing down the American people, and they wanted a socialist state. Because under socialism, the government controlled everything, and their goal was to control the government, which controlled everything and everyone. Yeah.
Right.
So, and she is very restless today.
Apparently. Lots of energy.
So, and parents realized what was going on, and so they complained to Congress. And so they created the 16th Amendment, which brought about the income tax.
Right.
But like I said, it was, at that time, what it meant was the profits of corporations, because they were doing a lot of damage to the country. And I would like to go back to no income tax for flesh and blood human beings.
So just for
American
the
citizens.
corporations.
Yeah, just go back to having it just at the corporate level. And I'd also do away with the inheritance tax. You know, the Bible, Israel was condemned because one thing they were condemned for in the Old Testament was the ruling class was stealing from widows and orphans. And that's what the inheritance tax is. You're stealing from
Right.
widows and orphans.
Right, you're taxing again. Things that have already been taxed actually twice.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I would do away with that altogether.
Okay.
And I would do away with the tax on humans.
Okay. So really reshaping the 16th Amendment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's
Well,
another.
it'd be going back to the original meaning of it.
Right, right. So maybe just some clarification.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's a pretty strong stance on that. So I think a lot of people would be happy finding a way to balance out taxation versus what we really need to survive as a country. So another issue that is pretty big in this country, and that I'd actually really like to hear your stance on, is the Second Amendment. That one's huge right now with all of the schools, all of the school shootings. I know here in this area, actually down in Springfield, there was a school shooting. I believe it was back in the 80s, and
That was one
it
of the
really
originals.
shook the state. So I'd like to hear your opinion on the Second Amendment, really.
There's a reason for the Second Amendment. They to protect ourselves
From who?
from anybody that wants to harm us,
Okay.
and that includes the government. They're, right now, they're talking about registering guns here in Oregon, and nobody's going to register the gun. Now, for the last about 2 years, Democrats have been going around. Every time Trump would hold a rally, Democrats would go and start a fight. They'd be rioting, and then it really kicked in after he won. They had some major riots, which included arson and talk about blowing up the White House and
I remember
Yeah.
hearing all of those. Yeah.
and an attempted assassination of one of the a Republican congressman. Ron Paul was attempted assassination. He was attacked. And these same people that are doing all these attacks are the ones that want to take away our guns.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
it's not going to happen. And if the Democrats have their way, what they really want is a Marxist dictatorship, which has destroyed every society it's been tried in.
Do you think that it's possible for the United States to get it right, a Marxist society?
No. There's a Marxism and all socialist views. They're really based on, have you read Plato's Republic?
I'm in the middle of reading it right now, actually.
Okay. They're based on that concept, where the government is the philosopher kings that rule everything, and these superior human beings are more intelligent than everyone else, and more honest than everyone else. They have the ability to see the long term better than everybody else. And the fact is, the government class isn't more intelligent than everybody else. They're not more honest than everybody else. And they have no better world, ability to see into what we need as anybody else. And you don't need to do that. Although she makes more sense than some of these politicians. So that's the fatal flaw in socialism. And because the government class is just like everybody else, it can't succeed. We all have our flaws. And if you have a government that controls everyone and everything, and you have flawed human beings making all these decisions, it can't work, and that, and that's true of all socialism. Adolf Hitler, who was head of the National Socialists in Germany, he said that the purpose of the National Socialist Party was to administer the world the way the world's supposed to be administered. Okay, no offense to Adolf Hitler, but I don't want the world administered the way he wanted it.
Offend the guy, it's okay.
Yeah.
I promise you it's okay.
Yeah.
But I 100% would agree with you. We can't lead the United States down the same path as Nazi Germany. And the only way to do that is really to give as much power to the individual people and not to the government that could lead the country in one direction like that. So,
Yeah, and that's what our founders, Benjamin Franklin later said that our Constitution isn't perfect, but it's better than anything that about as good as you're going to get from a group of human beings.
Right.
And he was right. It's not a perfect document, but it is better than all the alternatives, and it opened up the way for humanity to expand and to grow, which hasn't happened really under other forms of government. And right now, the Democrats want to destroy capitalism. You know, they want the socialist worldview, and they say we should do it because we're the richest country in the world. Okay, how do we get to be the richest country in the world?
Capitalism?
Yeah. Yeah. And while capitalism has flaws, it still has provided the ability for more people in the human race to better their lives and the lives of their families than any other system. And we need to keep it alive.
So, what is, do you think, the biggest danger to capitalism that we're seeing today?
Well, capitalism has freedom, and there's an element both in the and human nature being what it is. There's both the element that wants to control everyone and everything, but there's another element that wants to just float along and have everything given to them. And when you get enough people in that latter category, then the ones in the first category use them as an excuse to say, we got to help them, we got to control. That means you got to give us the control. Human nature being what it is, people that redistribute the wealth, because that's what they're talking about, redistributing wealth.
Right.
They have a tendency to end up with the wealth.
That we've seen time and time again.
Yes. And so, and socialism destroys individual initiative, because you're going to get the same thing. You know, we humans, we want to be rewarded for what we do.
Right.
And if we're not going to be rewarded, why do it? And so, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So, do you think that other than, you know, social welfare is what you're talking about here, capitalism has a certain mathematical equation that balances itself out? Obviously, in many ways, it's focused on each individual doing everything that he can to take care of himself and his family. But when you have outside forces affecting that equation, don't you think the government itself is throwing that balance out of whack?
Well, it is. If you look at the history of the United States, up until 1929, before that, about every 15 years, give or take a few, there would be a big depression.
Okay.
And the depression would, it would destroy the whole economy for about a year. But the government didn't get involved. And after about a year, things would come back, and then it would start being prosperous again, and even more so. And like I said, that was about every 15-year cycle. In 1929, that depression was used by Roosevelt. Although, to be honest, Hoover was a big government guy too. You know, he didn't implement the stuff that Roosevelt did, but
Definitely
he would
furthered
have.
the cause. Definitely.
Yeah. And And the Depression lasted until World War II, about
Mm-hmm.
a little over 10 years. And that's the longest depression the United States ever had. And World War II brought us out. But in the meantime, Roosevelt had set up this giant government that was controlling things. You know, he was dictator for life.
Mm.
And he's responsible for a lot of the problems we're having today.
So I'm kind of gathering really the way that you think here. It sounds like your goal is to keep the federal government, at least the federal government, as far out of your life as humanly possible. Now, whether or not that has anything to do with the state governments, that's a different thing.
Yeah, well, the Constitution sets up several levels of government, and I also believe in animal rights. That's what she wants to know.
That's a good thing.
But the Constitution does limit what the federal government's supposed to be doing. And a lot of what they're doing, we're $21 trillion in debt. And most of that, a lot of that is for things that the government's not supposed to be involved in,
Right.
like education. And the things they are supposed to be taking care of, like immigration, they're not taking care of. So yeah, I think most of our problems could be solved by going back, to having a constitutional republic. Okay. In Pennsylvania, the legislature set up districts. They've had several votes. The Democrats filed a lawsuit saying they didn't like the district. And it was in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which was controlled, majority were Democrats. So the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, on its own, without any constitutional authority, just said, yeah, we're going to make new districts. And that's what they're going to be voting on in November. Totally unconstitutional. If I were elected, my first act, once we take, because the first thing they do when they get into office is take an oath, defend the Constitution of the United States.
Right.
Against foreign and domestic enemies.
Right.
Okay. Every single congressman or woman from Pennsylvania is there unconstitutionally. And I would say they can't be seated. Let the battle begin right there.
Okay. That's definitely a first day. That's going to be a long fight, long fight. So another thing I'd like to know about you is what kind of experience do you have in terms of running an office like this?
I don't really have that. Excuse me. Hello. Come here, you. I haven't held office. I've complained. Come here. Come here. And so now instead of, if I actually win, I'll be doing instead of complaining.
Okay. This is good. This is good. Go ahead and sit.
But,
Sit right there. Good girl.
yeah, she's been a lot more active than usual. Once in a while she'll, yelp or something during the program, but she doesn't usually
She's
get
got
up and
a lot of energy
do
this
all
morning.
that.
Okay, so you're ready to go in there and make things happen.
Yeah.
So what is the first thing that you would tackle? Obviously, you just told us the first thing you would do, but policy-wise, what is the first thing that you would go in and tackle?
Oh. Well, there's several things that need to be done right off the top. The first one, obviously, try to keep Pennsylvania's delegation from taking office.
Right.
And once that's done, right now they're battling, like Trump has put in a lot of recommendations for, who's going to hold the various leadership roles in the executive branch. Okay, and the Senate's been holding it up. Now, the Senate didn't have that authority until right after the Civil War. So I would like to go back to letting the president pick his cabinet. He'd be responsible for them, and he'd definitely more of an authority as far as firing people than what they have right now. But let the president, whoever it is, have the people he wants in there. I would put in a lot of challenge, to overturn that post-Civil War law that gives the Senate the ability, because it's a statute. It's not part of the Constitution. And the reason they did it was because the Republicans at that time hated the South, the white Southerners, because they just fought a war.
Right. Right.
And Lincoln he was a Republican, but he wanted to bring the Southern states back into the Union. And in fact, that's why he chose Andrew Johnson to be his vice president, who was a Southern Democrat. But when Lincoln was, and if Lincoln hadn't been assassinated, he might have been able to pull it off.
Right.
Because he was the head of the Republican Party. But with him dead, then they hated Johnson.
Well, we're just about out of time,
Okay.
so would you just let everyone know where can they find more information on you and your political stances?
Well, I do have a YouTube, and that's where most people will be watching this, is on my YouTube channel. It's at Michael Marsh Constitution and .com, and share it. If you like what you hear and see, share it. With your neighbors. And there's no Republican running in the 3rd District. And so,
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today.